Hey guys, this is Falsers. I've been getting some messages here and there asking me about my build, why I use what skill, and how it benefits me, and why I don't use this, why I don't use that. And I wanted to do an entire video telling you guys about my build and why it is incredibly good and viable for both farming and bosses. So let's get started. With our bread and butter attack here, we're going to use Nether Tentacles. It says it only does 155 on paper. In reality, it's hitting things 2 and 3 times, depending on how big the character model is, or the monster model rather. The bigger it is, the more it's going to hit. So with Nether Tentacles, you're looking at 310 weapon damage minimum per shot usually, unless something is running towards you or it's a fast-moving mob. It's incredibly good. We're not worried about the 3% life leech on it. In Inferno, life leech is nerfed by 80% anyway. The only thing that doesn't really get that diminishing return is life on hit, but it's not a huge deal that we have 3% life leech on this skill. For our primary attack, we're using Entangling Shot with the Justice is Served rune for hatred generation. When you're spamming something for your main attack that costs hatred, hatred generation becomes very important. An alternate use for Entangling Shot is the Chain Gang rune if you really need to kite around big groups of enemies. That's pretty nice. And for bosses or single target a lot of time, people prefer the Devouring Arrow. That's another completely viable option. You can get a lot of good damage when the Pierce procs on Devouring Arrow. I've seen crits over 100k with this thing. It's pretty amazing for single target, no doubt. Anyway, let's move on to our companion here and skip ahead a little bit. We're using the bat for hatred generation. As I mentioned earlier, hatred generation is very important. So with the bat, and with Entangling Shot's hatred generation, and with my Templar having 1 hatred per second, and I think I've actually got a little bit on my quiver here. Yeah, a little bit of hatred generation there. Let's look at how slowly the hatred tank drains while spamming Nether Tentacles. Now I know I don't have a crazy attack speed, but nonetheless, that's draining pretty damn slow. That's a lot of Nether Tentacles before that thing's out. There's not going to be a lot of situations in Inferno where you're going to get to stand still that long spamming anyway. So when you factor in the time it takes that you're kiting around and stutter stepping, you just about have infinite hatred here with this build. And when it's out, let's get it drained real quick. Look how quickly it fills up with a couple Entangling Shots thrown in. And we're back to full. So, infinite Nether Tentacles is a godsend. You can AoE farm, you do great single target damage, it's amazing. Okay, let's talk about our defensive skills here. I use Smokescreen with the Lingering Fog rune. The base duration of Smokescreen is only 1 second. With Lingering Fog, that effect extends to 1.5 seconds. That's pretty damn valuable. That extra half second might not sound like a lot, but it really is. Let's look at the cooldown of Smokescreen without Lingering Fog, and the time I'm vulnerable when I'm spamming it.
Need more time.
You can see there's about a full second there when Smokescreen wears off, and that's on cooldown to where I'm taking hits. But when we put Lingering Fog on, that extra half second means there's only about a quarter of a second where I'm out of Smokescreen and I can't use it again.
I'm still waiting.
So if you're backed into a corner and you can't get out, that becomes very important. In addition to that, that extra half second is an extra half second of kiting time. When you're as quick as you end up being with tactical advantage, that extra kiting time is helpful. So after you've popped Smokescreen twice, you're going to notice you're out of discipline pretty quick. That's when you're going to want preparation. It only has a 45-second cooldown, and it instantly restores all of your discipline. With the backup plan rune, there's a 30% chance that preparation's cooldown will not be triggered. That's by far, I think, the best rune for this skill. This backup plan proc does not have an internal cooldown that I'm aware of, so it can proc 2 and 3 times without an internal cooldown in a row. Battle Scars is another one I see a lot of Demon Hunters using. In Inferno, I don't think healing for 60% of your max life is as good since you're dying in one shot from a lot of stuff anyway, especially as a Demon Hunter. So I would say backup plan is definitely the way to go. Alright, let's talk about our utility a little bit. We're looking at the Reign of Vengeance skill here. Now there's 2 runes for Reign of Vengeance that offer a lot of utility depending on what you're doing at the time. For just farming runs, I like to use Stampede. Stampede summons a wave of 10 shadow beasts, knocking things back and dealing a little bit of weapon damage. When using Stampede, you get something in a line, a corridor, a choke point of some kind. You pop it, and as long as it's not a boss mob, the yellow ones, it knocks them back. It knocks back champions, and it knocks back the minions of boss mobs, and obviously all the regular mobs. There are a couple giant mobs in the game where the knockback is either, not as noticeable, or it doesn't work on them. I don't think it works on, like, say, demonic triggers in Act 3. But there's not a lot you're going to run into where this is just not a great skill to pop and sit there and spam Nether Tentacles during. Things won't be able to get close enough to you to really impact you, and if they do, you can take a couple steps back and you'll be more than okay. The other rune for Reign of Vengeance that is incredibly viable is the Flying Strike rune. It summons 8 shadow beasts, each of which stun enemies for 2 seconds. On bosses, that gets reduced down to about 1 second, about half. But because there's 8 of them falling down in the same place over time, you end up stun locking bosses for around 4 to 6 seconds with this thing. It's just a good skill. It's a great skill to use on bosses. It's great solo, it's great in groups. You can pop it on a boss, interrupt animations, and in addition to that, have a lot of free time to sit there and free cast on bosses. Alright, let's talk about our passives here a little bit. Tactical Advantage, I showed you guys that earlier with Smokescreen. It's amazing for kiting. You use this for the synergy with Smokescreen. Unless you're stacking, a good deal of movement speed, you're just not going to be quick enough, even if you pop Smokescreen, to get out of a lot of mechanics and be a safe distance back to continue casting with just 1 Smokescreen. You can probably do it with 2, but for the sake of saving discipline, I think Tactical Advantage is a good safe bet here. That's a big movement speed boost right there, and it's very handy. Alright, must have for every Demon Hunter. I cannot imagine a Demon Hunter build not running this move is Archery. You get a great buff no matter what you're using. For the most part in Inferno, you're probably going to be using a bow or a crossbow unless you're one of those lucky bastards that have somehow found an amazing hand crossbow somewhere with competitive DPS. 15% flat increased damage on bows, 50% crit hit damage on crossbows, which, by the way, synergizes really well if you get your crossbow socketed up with a crit damage gem there. And then that also synergizes really well with hand crossbows, 10% crit hit chance. Just an amazing passive. I think everybody should be running it. Lastly, I like to run Sharpshooter with Nether Tentacles. That initial salvo you shoot with Nether Tentacles has Sharpshooter on it. Sharpshooter does not actually trigger until the first one hits with Nether Tentacles, and the way it's designed is all the other tentacles that you have shot with Sharpshooter active will have the bonus until the first one hits. I probably worded that pretty poorly. So when you're firing, say 5 Nether Tentacles and 1 hits while the other 4 are out, all 5 of those will crit 100% of the time. Only when you fire that 6th one after the first one is hit will they stop critting. It's amazing. You can really go in and just blow enemies down with this thing. If you don't really want to rely on that initial salvo, or you don't like the RNG of Sharpshooter, I think Steady Aim is another viable option. Increases your damage by a flat 20%, as long as there's nothing within 10 yards. 10 yards is really damn close to you. It's not, 10 yards in WoW terms, it's 10 yards in Diablo terms, and that's not very far. Having said that, if you're sitting in melee range as a Demon Hunter, it's not going to do you much good, as my cat is agreeing with me right now. So, either Sharpshooter or Steady Aim, very viable choices for what you want to do here. Alright guys, that pretty much sums it up here. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'll be happy to help you with them. Thank you.